confirmed coronavirus cases in the United States is approaching the 1 million mark. Yet some states like Georgia have begun to ease stay-at-home restrictions. For assessment on this, I'm joined by an old friend, Bob Barr, the former Republican congressman from Georgia, who also served as a former U.S. attorney. He's in Atlanta. Okay, your state has more than 23,000 confirmed cases, 19 and more than 900 deaths. Should you have reopened?
Absolutely, Larry. I think a lot of these governments, including sometimes the federal government, don't give people the credit that they deserve. Most people in this country are rational, and are responsible. Here in Georgia, for example, there are thousands upon thousands of small businesses that either have already had to close their doors permanently or have really come to the point where if they can't reopen, they cannot reopen. So the restrictions that we had in place in Georgia that Governor Brian Kemp loosened last week are measured. They're very carefully crafted, and I think they are very, very appropriate. As a matter of fact, 2 hours ago, I got a haircut at my local hair salon that I go to.
And weren't you, in doing that, risking your own health and the barber in opening risking his health?
I don't think any more than doing anything else in our society, Larry. I wore a face mask. The hairstylist wore a face mask. They practiced social distancing. There were not anybody else within 6 feet, actually more than 6 feet. So the restrictions that are required of businesses that do open, I think, are more than sufficient to reasonably protect both the public and the business owners themselves.
Were you surprised that President Trump disagreed with your governor?
It's hard to be surprised at anything that President Trump says or does because he changes his mind so often. I do think overall he's done a very good job on the regulatory front of dealing with this medical problem, but apparently he sort of gave the green light, so to speak, for states to do what Georgia did, and then yet when Georgia's governor decided to do what the president seemed to be urging the states to do, he got beat up by the president. So that's unfortunate, but it's something that seems to happen with some regularity nowadays.
What's the future of schools in your state?
Schools across the state of Georgia, Larry, are basically closed for the year. We don't yet know whether they will reopen on a strict semester basis or earlier or later in the summer or early fall. But for the current academic year, public schools and private schools in Georgia are finished for the year.
President Trump on Monday openly questioned why poorly run states, which he claimed are all Democrat-run, are seeking aid from the federal government. What do you agree with that?
I do think that states need to assume a lot more responsibility for the issues that now face them than a lot of them have been. It's a lot of these issues, Larry, I think, are supposed to be and traditionally have been handled by the states with support from the federal government. Nowadays, it seems to be that the default position by the states is to turn to the federal government for everything, criticize it if you don't get enough, and only then should the states be involved. So I agree with the president. The states need to assume more responsibility here than many of them have.
But New York puts more into the federal government than a lot of states combined.
Well, here in Georgia, for example, I recall when I was in the House of Representatives a number of years ago, I would hear from officials in Georgia that Georgia was contributing more to the transportation road tax than we were getting back. You know, we live in a federal system, and if every state were to get back exactly the same amount that its citizens pay in federal taxes of various sorts, then why have those taxes in the first place? You know, in New York, they probably get more in some areas than other states, and perhaps less in some other areas. But I think overall, it pretty much evens out, Larry.
Georgia's Stacey Abrams, widely touted as a possible vice presidential pick for Joe Biden. She ran a hell of a race for governor. What do you make of her?
Uh, well, she was in the state legislature here for a few years, and by all accounts, did a good job. She's a lot more liberal, certainly, than my political persuasions. But since running 2 years ago for governor and losing to Brian Kemp, she really has done nothing of substance other than complain about not having won the election in 2016 and raising a lot of money for not having won the election, but claiming that she really should have won. So I don't really think that she's done anything recently that would certainly lead me and a lot of people to believe that she has done anything that would qualify her to serve as vice president.
You think there's a chance we could be without an election?
No, I don't. I have heard, as you have, various people suggesting that the election, the federal election, might be postponed or whatnot. Congress would have to do that. And the problem is, Larry, as you know as well as I do, that the terms of the president and the vice president and all members of the House of Representatives, as well as 2/3 of the Senate, expire in January. That's constitutional. So there has to be an election. Otherwise, we're going to be without a president or vice president come January 20th at noon. And come early January, we'd be without anybody in the House of Representatives and only 2/3 of the senators in office.
Bob, it's always great talking with you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Larry.